Winter, spring, summer, fall, seasons change, we still keep it together.
Hey, Beverly Hills 90210 fans! Are you ready to dive deep, episode by episode, storyline by storyline, character by character, as we break down the making of your favorite zip code? With your hosts, Charles Rosen.
Did I say that?
Harry
All this
Mullen.
heinous thing about the real person, and we're going, what? We're getting rid of this guy.
Pete Ferrero.
I'm feeling wonderful. Kathleen looks TV crush worthy.
Like so many special guests. And all your questions. Live on the Beverly Hills 90210 show. Oh, yeah.
Everybody dance now.
All right. It's always fun to have Gretchen and Aaron here talking about 90210. I know you guys are very busy, so I appreciate you guys coming on. Anything you want to talk about that you're working on now? Something cool and fun, maybe?
Ooh, yeah. We just finished production. A good friend of ours named Karen Gist, she created a show for Fox called Our Kind of People that is airing right now. And we got to be part of that for this last season, and it was so much fun. And the only thing with, COVID restrictions, we didn't get to go to set. They were shooting in North Carolina, but we had a blast. We had the best staff, and it was really great working with Karen again. And it was really fun. I mean, we're not back in a writer's room proper yet. We're still all Zooming.
Yeah.
But it's still fun to, be a part of that group and chatting, getting to know each other. And there's nothing like a writer's room. It's just so fun.
And then we have a couple pilots, or just a couple things we're looking at, books to maybe adapt a script that we've been sort of working on for a while. But I'll tell you, watching 90210, I mean, it made me kind of misty for the days when you did 22 episodes. Things are so short now, even Our Kind of People. It was also fun to be back at Fox.
Sure.
We hadn't worked at Fox for such a long time. And but yeah, I mean, this was a 15 episode order, and it's just so different. Watching the episode, it made me realize just how much TV has changed.
Big time. I mean, it's interesting too, because when I do the podcast, like there's so many different layers of it, right? There's the fans that watch 90210 and they have all their favorites and the storylines, and they can very quickly say, I didn't like this or I didn't like that. But back in the day, they were trying to fill 32 episodes. They were doing double ups, right? Yeah. And then even you guys in the ending seasons, 20 something episodes.
26.
We're talking about people doing 6 to 10 now, maybe 4.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's like there's a lot that has to happen in a series that we have to think about, right?
And I think about too, like, very little emailing at that point, very little texting, barely. I mean, I don't even know if Wikipedia was really around. I mean, all of the research that was done for the show, you either did on your own and called sources, almost like journalism,
sure,
or that was the main job of a writer's assistant back then. Right. Was, they would actually have sources of their own, and they would sort of spend the day making phone calls and tracking down information. It was just such a different time, and I cannot believe how many episodes we did without some of the tools that we were
right. Now it's Google, right? We can start at Google. What was that like if you're writing a period piece? What was that? Well, you can always look this stuff up, but I mean, or a specific disorder or something along those lines, You'd have
to jot it down, and you'd either go out and talk to the writer's assistant and say, hey, can you, and they did. Ours always had like a magic Rolodex, because they would build up their contacts with you that had someone at the police station. They had somebody in the hospital. They had all sorts of medical experts. They had animal, like whatever. And each opportunity for them to add to that Rolodex, I think they were always really excited to have.
Yeah.
And so they would do the research, or a lot of times, I think Aaron and I, just because we were the junior writers on 9 we would do a lot of our own, just because we were curious, and we weren't in all the meetings that maybe some of the higher up people were in. And so we'd do some of our own, but you'd have to become a little mini expert on it. It was research. It was genuine research on things.
So you watched this one, Doc Martin. Did you remember writing it, or do you remember being a part of it? This is a long time ago, some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Erin.
No, you go first.
No, I remember it being very in approaching it, it was always approached with such care, because it was, I think it was like, the idea was for Donna, it was going to be like the audience experiencing loss in this way. And I mean, having even lived through it, looking back now, Erin, I don't know about you, but I was like shocked that where we picked it up and like went through every step, meaning from the moment he's pronounced deceased, right? Like we're with the characters, we're with Doc Martin. I mean, like the recently passed Doc Martin. I mean, I was amazed at sort of like not how we didn't rush through the grief of that episode.
Right.
In a good way, like amazed. I'm like sort of
no,
like,
it was great. It was great that we all experienced it, and I think it gives the audience an opportunity to experience the grief of this character. So I'm curious though, at the start of this season, season 10, how soon did you know this was going to be the last season?
It came down to the wire.
It did.
I remember it really coming down to the wire. And I just have to add though, I remember being part of maybe the breaking of it, but this was such a John Eisendrath, Laurie McCarthy masterclass sort of episode. I mean, those are two of the best writers we've ever gotten to work with and for. I mean, they're so talented and so good at just like turning one idea just over in their hands over and over, and like looking at it from this side and looking at it from that side, and building out points of view in ways where you don't hate you understand each side of things. So they were great teachers to us. So they really, I just thought, wow, like they just did an amazing job. But in terms of knowing whether or not we were coming back or not, I mean, at that point we were getting like a 10 rating and a 10 share. Which
is, by the way, unheard of now. No shows don't get that.
No,
that was probably down from previous seasons.
It was like, I remember when we started.
But I mean, nobody gets a number like that.
No, and when we started on the show, I feel like we were doing maybe like, we were sort of in the 11 and 12 share, maybe season 9. But but it was really, it was almost going to happen. I mean,
yeah, it was close.
It was close, and I think that was part of the nervousness of like the showrunners and stuff. Like at this point was, well, we have this huge responsibility, John and Laurie, like huge responsibility to wrap up this gigantic show, and give the fans their due and be respectful to the actors and the characters they created. And I remember it just being like, well, we had two different plans, kind of, we were sort of moving it. And then it really did. It came down like, I don't even feel like Gretchen. I feel like those last 2 episodes were probably written. That was like when we found out.
I think that's right.
So walking into this, I mean, you don't know. Well, I've always heard that Donna and David through the years was always going to be the end point. For even going back in the day, did you guys have that sense too, that would be the ending of the show, that Donna and David would be? I'm going there because we're losing a pivotal character to that story. So did you know that Donna and David would be sort of an end game?
I honestly feel like that's such an odd thing to think about in retrospect. I think probably by the time we got there in seasons 9 and 10, it was so probably just part of what everybody who was there already knew.
Sure.
I never felt like there was a different thing on the horizon, but I think it was kind of a given. Don't you think, Erin? I think it was just something that we knew, like toward the end, that's something that was going to be something that we were going to do.
I think in terms of, so would have been so polarizing to have picked, chosen like the Dylan, even though I'm a Dylan Kelly
sure
fan, I think it might have been super polarizing to make that choice. I feel like even Mr. Spelling probably had quite a large say in what was going to happen there too. I mean, he was so involved. I mean, he let the writers do their thing, but at the same time, like when it came to things like finales and paying certain things off, I think he probably had quite a large say in that too.
were there conversations like that once you realize, oh, this is gonna be in the season, like where they're like, well, we have to do this, you know, like were those kinds of things that were starting to develop very quickly for you?
I think it was just pretty much we knew the wedding, right? Like it was like once we knew it was the end. I mean, even I think we also had to make it in case there was a last minute change. The series could have continued. I mean, just
Sure.
put them there, right? But
Yeah.
I think that was definitely like by the end, it was all about, you know, what was also great about a lot of the episodes have this, and it's always, I feel like there's such, when you have like a nice big central event in it, like in the middle of your like holding your episode together, because all these characters are all such part of each other's worlds that like they all, like Aaron was saying before, all have a part to play in something this big, like Dr. Marcil or a wedding between two of your main characters, who I think most people felt like they really did grow up with.
Sure, especially those two.
Yeah, especially those two. It always does. It helps so much, but I think that like knowing it was probably by the time we were really breaking it and doing it, knowing that it was the big event, because
Right.
it's the big event. Yeah, it was something that was definitely like, that's how you attack the episode, or the 2-part episode, or whatever it is.
Well, it's interesting too, because in, you know, I've had conversations about when people left the show and they would want to maybe have a conversation, should we kill the person off? Like there was always a thing of Mr. Spelling saying, nah, don't kill him off. You know what I mean? Right. Like, so I mean, so now here we're actually gonna kill off a character. We're doing it. What was this process like? Do you remember where this conversation started, that it was time to do this to this, and this character's so beloved, you know what I mean? So it's it's not like, I mean, listen, I love Mel Silver too. I mean, he's a friend and all that, but I think losing Michael Durrell's character is a huge deal.
Yeah, big deal. I mean, such a beloved character. And again, like it was so long ago and it's such a blur. I mean, I'm sure John Eisendrath remembers all of these conversations, because he was always up and down and in and out. You know, the writers were in the same office as Mr. Spelling. I mean, same office building. He was a floor up or 2 floors up. And so I remember John and Laurie always, you know, going up and down and getting on the phone and this, that, and the other. I mean, I think this particularly must have, I mean, the care with which this had to be handled, because life imitates art a little bit when it comes to the Donna storylines.
Sure.
I mean, I couldn't even get over how much Kathleen looks like Candy Spelling.
Oh, Catherine. Catherine.
I mean, Catherine.
Yeah, Catherine Cannon.
Yeah, my apologies.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
Like I literally, I was like, boy, this really was close to home in a lot of ways. And so, I mean, kind of, not that there was really any similarity beyond that, but I mean, it was just interesting, because how do you divorce yourself from, you know, Donna and Tori and Mr. Spelling and the show? And so in a weird way, we were almost sort of like, it just had to be carefully done.
Yeah.
In terms of how he was eulogized and what he meant. And, you know, that had to be done with some sensitivity. But I think, you know, what I had forgotten, and I'm sure the fans will be like coming after me with pitchforks and torches, is I had forgotten that we had made Gina and Donna sisters. I mean, I'm watching it and I'm like, wait,
oh yeah.
We did that, and I feel like that might have been even sort of a Hail Mary in the in just in terms of like looking for story, looking for ways to kind of do this. You know, something also, I don't know where Vanessa was at contractually. I don't know if she was contracted for more than what she was in. I doubt we would have wasted the money of like paying her to not be an episode. So something tells me maybe.
Well, it's interesting. I was going to ask you about that, because she did an interview recently where she said that it was not something that was planned. Like I think her decision to leave happened suddenly. And I don't know if you guys are even how aware of stuff. I mean, you at some point have to be aware a character's leaving and now we need to write her out. And I don't know that Vanessa had from the interview, I don't know her, but I don't know that she had a great experience on 90210.
You know, she was always great, but she was in a tough position coming into a show with so many people who had known and worked with each other for so long. And then of course she and Brian were together at that point. It's interesting. We just never really, Vanessa kind of kept to herself. Lovely. And by the way, when I watch her performances back, I'm just like, gosh, she's good.
So
like,
good.
She's so, I mean, that episode, everybody was great, but I was just like, you know, she really, for someone who was brought on to sort of replace Valerie,
Sure.
That character turned out so differently than that. Like, and that's Vanessa, and that's, you know, like, again, Laurie and John's writing and just making her super three-dimensional. So the cool part is, whether she was having a good time or not, you sure can't tell from her performance. Like, she did not phone it in. So
it is interesting though about actors. Like like, is the art shaping the experience versus the experience shaping the art? You know, because even some of the things that she says in here about, like, you know, when David just suggests, you know, maybe something else could have been done, you know, she immediately is on guard about, you know, what is being said of her in this group, right? So there's a lot of art imitation here, right?
It does feel like it does seem to be a comment on, especially for Gina, how hard it is to be brought into this group, right? Like, it's and the obstacles and by the way, I think it is, and what is the secret to get into any, like, be accepted into any friendship?
Sure.
I think, like, helps if you're dating someone in the group. It's like really hard to cold walk into a friendship group, right?
Yeah.
So but you know, then you look at Janet, you look at Lindsay, and she
totally different experience.
And she had a very different experience. And so but going back to what Aaron was saying, I think it is also just, it's a testament to an artist using whatever's going on with her. I mean, I feel like that Vanessa did such a beautiful job, because a lot of times I feel like that character would just get kicked in the teeth over and over again. And I felt like the amount of times she did slip up a lot, but like the amount of times she got punished for slipping up, I was like, "Ooh, girl, that's tough." But like, I also at the same time, she had like you kind of felt that, not that this justifies it, but she had the mettle, like she could handle it. Like she was really. I don't worry about a character like that. It's going to be hard. It's going to be adventure, but there's a part of me that does want to go with her on that journey wherever she's going, because I think she's going to run into, I like how she handles situations a lot.
Totally.
And I just think she's interesting. And I also, it made me think about just watching it before. I didn't know you were going to ask about this specifically, but it made me think about something else that 90210 did so well that I don't feel like we spend a lot of time with on television, like saying goodbye to a character like that. Like, there was time taken to say she's leaving and we're going to have characters say goodbye in an episode of goodbyes.
Seriously, yeah.
Yeah.
I do remember though, I mean, because those last two seasons were a lot of goodbyes. Hello.
Yes,
goodbyes.
there were.
And I do remember, like,
I mean, I feel like you guys got the task of like writing so many goodbyes. It was like the whole thing, like, you got to get used to this because everybody's leaving at some point.
Yeah,
right?
and I you know, and I think there was a conscientious choice, even though when I watched it back, I watched the episode twice that you sent us, and I was like, wait, is that how we sent her out? And I know there was a conscious choice not to have her like at the cab, not to sort of walk to the sunset, but it still does feel a little anticlimactic almost, because she's, you know, I was wanting a final scene with Dylan.
Definitely.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, and instead she's just like, yeah.
And that's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then she has that lovely scene with Donna, but even that one, she's like, well, I'll see ya. Again, there's no judgment in the performances, but I was like, oh God, like, what were we like? What? It was a lovely scene. Again,
yeah, lovely.
You're just expecting one more, and I don't know if we shot one. I don't know if we were too long and had to pare it back. Although we very rarely shot scenes on that show that we didn't use. So that just felt a little bit, kind of a bummer.
She says in the interview that Luke begged her to stay, that he wrote her a lovely letter. Are you aware of all those things, but as writers, or not really?
I mean, I think also, no, we weren't aware of that. But I think, first of all, again, that was a very how production, where the cast was up with the crew, they were really in their own their fame made it this way, the popularity made it this way, but I think also protectively, it was a conscious effort to keep them very safe in where they were in their
Of course.
production. And so they were a family. They were very tight. And I think there was some stuff that I don't even know if would be appropriate for us at the time to like be part of.
Right.
They were always so welcoming to us. Like Aaron and I, like literally to this day, it was the most wonderful experience. But also in the hierarchy of where we were at that time, with even just on a writing staff, there's so much stuff that goes on in the upper levels that we would just never hear about, because it is like grown-up talk. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like the grown-ups are figuring stuff out. And so I feel like a lot of times there's a lot of like discussion that happens that we're only hearing the final result of that discussion. Like today we'll be talking about this story during this story. So we weren't aware of that. I'm not surprised to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm not either. I mean, I do know that by the end, I mean, you're talking about a group of actors who basically never had a break.
Right.
I mean, never. I mean, barely any time to do a feature if you wanted. I mean, also, I remember Vanessa was quite the get at that time, because she was coming, yes, she had done, I think it was GH. General
Definitely.
Hospital.
Yeah, I think she was super popular on that
she
too.
was coming off of features too. Like,
Yeah.
she had some pretty large parts in some pretty big features. So I think that was sort of like, quite a get to have her do this. So but I do remember by the end, there was just a fatigue, I think there was just a fatigue. And, if I'm being honest, the sense that we got was that at the end of the day, that the cast was ready to do something different or to just have a break.
Yeah.
I get it. Like, boy, they worked hard. They worked hard, but it was also by that point, it was like, you come in, you shoot your scenes, you leave. You come in, and even in a table read, which we had the entire time, like most shows drop table reads after a certain amount of time.
Sure.
But they all still came, they all did that, but it was just very much like, where do you need me? Where am I going? The other thing that I was amazed by in this episode was still how many group scenes. Like, you would never have that many group scenes anymore, because the actors would be like, I'm not coming in to sit in the background for Kelly and Dylan to have a scene at the bar.
Right.
Like, and I just, like, again, that's just the power of Aaron Spelling too. I mean, it's like, this is a show about friends. This is a show about group scenes, and we did them a lot. I mean, that would never, ever, like, the first thing that line producers would be saying is, can we cut, do we need to have Ian and do we need them all at the funeral? Do we need them all for this scene? Because it's not really affecting them. But they always, they came.
They were there.
And I'm looking at it now, it's like, the show was such a machine in terms of the budget and the time. We did not go over 12 hours. If we got to 12 hours a day, that we were doing something wrong. It was such a fine-tuned operation. I just thought, that just wouldn't happen nowadays. I mean, but you really do feel the sense of these people, this friendship group, because they're just popping up in all these different places. And I just that took me by surprise.
I'm curious. I don't even know if you guys would know this, but Michael Durrell, all of the parents were there pretty much the entire run of the series. When they were introduced to the end, they were all there. Michael's the only one that has this happen to. Do you know what Michael would have even felt about this happening?
I don't know. I mean, he came back in when we did the storyline, obviously, about Gina and
Right.
Donna sisters. And I just can't remember, Gretchen. Can you like?
Did you know? I guess did you know that you were going to do this when? Yeah.
That's what I cannot.
I can't remember either. It's such an interesting thing, especially like we were saying in the beginning. If we knew Donna was going to get married. I mean, I don't know if it was also like trying to figure out how to cover, because they are at this very interesting time in their lives, are out of college. And I do feel like this is also when my friendship group from college, and I'm assuming like people you were close to when you were younger, this is when people do start getting jobs in different cities, and people do start peeling away, and people do start losing their parents. So I think like it's very timely that story be told, especially for if we knew that like we were coming towards the end. And I think it would start happening for a lot of people in that age group. But I don't remember how the parent was chosen. I don't remember when the parent.
I mean, it makes sense who you chose. It makes total sense.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does.
I mean, we were always sort of like working ahead. I mean, we did have like a large, we were breaking each individual episode, but then we had a wall that just had the characters and the entire 22 or however many we were doing that season, and the entire sort of arc, for each character. So, I mean, I can see how it would have been like, okay, let's do a story where Gina and Donna find this out. That can explain why Felice and her sister have such bad blood. I mean, I think we were just kind of making it up as we went along. But I think then at that point it would be like, okay, what's an awful thing that could drive a wedge even further between Donna and Gina? Okay, well, probably if Dr. Martin died,
right?
And then at that point, whether or not we knew that, like how far in advance we knew Vanessa was leaving, then it would have been like, well, maybe that's the thing that's going to finally get her to go. I mean, and it's interesting that ultimately it was that more than anything that was, and I think ultimately realizing that, I mean, again, like Dylan, and it's a testament to Luke, but like he flips the script on her.
Yes.
I mean, it's like,
he's the one who comes up with the idea of leaving.
Yes, and then he just changes it on her, and like again, like it's a testament to Luke that you don't watch that and go, God, I hate him.
Yeah. There's some beautiful stuff with Luke in this episode. The fact that you guys let Dylan, Gina is totally distraught. She just lost her father, but nobody's acknowledging it as that. He's just like, and then Dylan says, I'm sorry about your dad. Really beautiful right there. I think that's some of the nice stuff that Dylan saw her. He got her, right?
Yeah. As Dylan, who like, and I do love that scene at the Beach with After Dark where it seems like just a small tiny little conversation between Dylan and Kelly turns into this fight.
I love that stuff
like
with them.
I love it too. But it was, I mean, she does kind of like when she has her thing about like, this is what you do, you make us all like, he's always been the guy who's like always has a toe out, he's always looking for his exit, he's always looking for his way out. And the fact that he's like the cat, right? He left, he came back, he's in and he's out. And he's threatening to leave again, and you don't even see everybody go, "What? You're gonna go?"
They just all know that this is what you do, right?
Yeah.
So it is though amazing that he brings it up, and then he's like, "But I'm staying." So
it was just like, I mean, there one just on an aside on a Luke tangent. This was not a show where people improv'd.
Right.
You pretty much stuck to the script,
mm-hmm.
But Luke was sort of allowed to a little bit, and he did. And there was one thing in that scene with Kelly at the Peachwood After Dark. I'm sure it was a Luke improv where he's talking about, don't try this at home, kids.
Yes, I caught that. Yes,
that is such a Luke Perry little improv, and it warmed my heart to see it because I was like, oh man, he added that. I love him so much.
The other thing that's happening in this episode that's interesting is it's coming off of an episode where I mean, I haven't seen it, and maybe one day we can cover it because it's a wild storyline where Noah gets kidnapped.
Bananas.
Yeah.
Bananas.
And Dylan is obviously the hero in the scenario, and Kelly is at him about what he did in this. Do you want to talk briefly about that banana storyline real quick? And we could dive into it at another time, but
I mean, I just can't. I was like, wait a second. I remembered kidnapping Noah, and
Right.
then of course you start to do a little, like
Rolling
Googling
back. Yeah.
I remembered it was like, oh right, those characters Josie and Shane.
Yes.
And I think that the actress who played Josie,
She's like totally on All My Children. Sydney
yeah,
Penny.
she was a child star. Like,
yes, she's
you know,
beautiful. She's talented.
gorgeous,
All of that. Yes.
super talented. And I was like, man, I just love that. Like when people signed up for this batshit stuff, they still committed 100%.
Yes.
We'll
have fun with that some other time.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and watch it because just in reading the synopsis of it, I was like, wait, what? Oh yeah. Like I want to see how it was executed as well. So yeah. Again,
it's very interesting too. Like, that was one of those shows, and I feel like this is less and less a thing. But the thing that was always so fun about working on a TV staff in the early years when we were coming up is each staff member brought their own style to the show. So like an Aaron and Gretchen episode probably was a little more funny, probably a little more, maybe had a little more out of control stuff going on, maybe just a little bit bigger in terms of sort of plot or just the fun of it. A John and Lori episode, like, John was always like, he was really great with the issue kind of stuff.
Sure.
And sort of like both sides of an issue and how that would inflame characters. I feel like Lori was always the pure emotion and complicated character relationships. And then like Matt Dearborn and Matt Dearborn was like, I think that might have been his, or maybe it was Tyler's, but like Matt and Tyler, like Matt always had like a little more bro-y kind of a vibe,
sure,
a little bit more action-y. Tyler also was like really, really funny. So, but nowadays, like that's just getting, with the advent of like showrunner as auteur, which I think is just the firm place we are now.
Yes.
Everything just feels like it's come through one person's typewriter.
Yeah.
And it used to be, even on Roswell, this was the case where like the showrunners just let the writing staff bring a bit of themselves
yes
to the proceedings. And it just felt a little fresher than things do now.
I agree. And that goes on all the way from the beginning of 90210 to the end. The staffs that were were bringing their own personal stories to the show
100%
through the characters. Yeah.
100%.
But I always think it's tougher for you guys in some ways because you're bringing so much history and there's so much responsibility in, like, even David says, oh, I know what happened because I lost my grandfather. You have to have that knowledge of the history.
Yes.
And you're constantly always sort of having to like remember it, because it's been known that 90210 fans know the history. It's not a show that Yeah.
In thinking of that too, just watching that, I was like, that was something else that I feel like Gretchen and I really played a part in, which was like, and I guess me more because I had watched it for so long, was just those moments where it's like, let's drop this piece of history just to, or they could relate because he lost grandpa or whatever it is, like just those little nuggets. We always endeavored to kind of like push for those,
honor the history of the characters.
Just because it did cement them, and I think the cast liked it, and I think the fans really respected it too.
And it was a team effort because, like, I have to say, like, a lot of the times the cast was always like, they were such good stewards of their own character. Like they'd be like, that won't track because season whatever, blah, 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 which was always like, by the time it gets to them, hopefully all that stuff has been caught, but it was a great almost safety net to have. But there are also sometimes when they'd be like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that. That's great. Sure. Like, thank you for bringing that up. So like, or making sure we track that. So, it was always a group effort, and it was so good that so many people, even like the crew members also, like people had been there the entire time and they were tracking stuff as well. Everybody played their part and everybody was very invested in that show.
It's fun.
One of those things that's like, sorry to interrupt. Another one of those things that is starting to die out with the advent of these shorter orders is that crew was a family.
Yeah.
Right.
There was a very good chance that they had worked on that show practically from the pilot. Now we lost people and replaced people,
Of course.
but when you had a job that lasted almost all year round,
And you knew it was coming back.
episodes 32, and you knew you were coming back, it really was a family.
I think of like Drew Kinney, who was in the art department, and Jill Henkel, who was there forever. You know, those people were there forever. So I mean, these things matter. They have a good working knowledge. When everybody has that knowledge of where we are, and I remember when I built that set, or we put this prop in. You know, that's those finer details I think are lost these days because there's just not that much time to think about what. You know, because you have so many seasons, so many different characters in 90210.
And I think, Peter, you know better than I, and Aaron, you know better than I at this one, but like, I feel like even the location, like that episode, a lot of locations. And I feel like the fact that we were able to consistently get people to give up their homes so that we could come in, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think there was so much goodwill also towards the show, because like, the sense of place is so strong. Like whether or not you've ever been to Beverly Hills, like that world that is the show Beverly Hills 90210, it is there's such a strong sense of place and continuity. It's really amazing.
For sure. One of the other people that we see in this episode is Josie Davis, who's Camille. And I love her. I forgot that she was in 90210. And then I saw this and I was like, oh, right. Because I think she played someone else like a year prior or something.
Yep.
So on that note, like when you want to bring the actress, because you must obviously love the actress, right? Does somebody say, you know, she did play another character last year? Does anybody say that to you? Or are you just like, whatever, she's Camille now?
I don't remember what other character she played. I mean, I know that I just don't remember, but it was, I mean, people did cycle through, and Mr. Spelling, you know, like didn't have a problem with that. I mean, we brought back, I forget the actress's name. She had been married to Les Moonves prior to Julie Chen. And she played, like, I think in the storyline where Aaron, David's sister, went missing, like she played, you know, she played like a, you know, a counselor or someone who was
something like that. Yeah.
Well, she had been like a doctor on the show. Like, you know, she had been a nurse or a cop. Like she would always pop up.
It's amazing. She's just had a lot of careers.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, so I know that like it wasn't necessarily that big of a deal, but it was interesting to see Josie again. Like even I was like, oh my God. You know, I don't know if we created that character, but that character was named after a really good friend of ours named Camille, who was in fashion. And 90210 was her favorite show.
Oh, that's amazing. I love when I hear those names like that, because fans love that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think to this day, Camille would still be like, it's the best thing I've ever had happen. And I mean,
she will always be
not in her life, but
she will always be this character in a way. You know what I mean? Like it's a gift that you gave her for sure.
Yeah, she's a huge fan of the show.
And I thought Catherine Cannon is incredible in this episode.
Fantastic.
Talk to me about her and Catherine and what you saw when you watched this back.
I mean, I'm blown away by it. Honestly, like the commitment and the acting is so good. And I feel like in a lot of ways they, like the parents on the show did, maybe some of the parents who were a little more lady, not as much, but that's the character they're playing. They do ground the show in such a sense of reality. And I really thought, and also like since they're older, and I don't think the 90210 main cast, I almost call them the kids at this point, they're not the kids anymore, but the kids to that generation, they were okay with usually with having their characters show like go through complex sort of like, as time went on in television, I mean, or even in movies, likability became very, very important. And I think especially when you've got an actress who's of her her like background and her talent, showing that like you can show like the uglier sides of grief that bring out the fear and the anger and the misplaced anger it might be on others, and doing it so well. Like she never lost me. Do you know what I mean? Like I was always like, as much as I was like, ooh, you might regret that later, what you're saying to Gina or whatnot.
Right.
She never lost me because she was a very good, complex, interesting actress. You saw everything going on there, and how hard this was for. I believed it. It was just really well done. And I loved also how, like, I'm sorry, but the hell Donna like has to step in and like be the adult. Like, I think that's also why it was such an important tale to tell, to show how like this is like a coming of age story in a lot of ways, where all of a sudden you're expected to be the grown-up in the room and look for the will, or look for the life insurance policy, and watching your mother be helpless in a time where you really like your mother to take charge, right?
And she's such a complex character, as you said. So she's always comes at something with anger or dismissal. You know, that's what Felice does. We've seen her. And so she does that, but in a way that's grief stricken, right?
The thing that I loved about the show was that the parents were really well drawn.
Yes.
You know, they were specific. You had Jackie, who was a mess. You know,
and you guys utilized her a bunch.
Oh yeah, who was a better friend than was a mother. But I feel like Felice, I mean, everybody knows how Felice is going to react to a situation. You know, and it was just like such an old-fashioned sort of character, but at the same time so relatable. And again, just like watching her lose it, because Felice never lost it.
Right.
Felice lose it on Donna, but
For
like
sure.
Felice was in control. You know, Felice was like this button down, you know, sort of fascist mom. But again, like, and Mal Silver, really well drawn. The Walsh parents, really well drawn. Like, and that's just a testament to the show. I mean, the other thing, I don't know, Gretchen, if you noticed, but like, even the I remembered the other thing I appreciated was even you'd call him like an under 5 character. Like, they even are well, you know, there was even an attempt to kind of like live in that person's life. Like the valet Parker, who's like, you know, well, you know, my brother's you know, what did he say? My brother's an artist
or
something. Yeah.
Like, and it's like, that doesn't happen anymore. Like, that was
even the guy that gets into it with Noah about what did you guys do last night? There's another character like that.
The tow truck driver. He's like, let me tell you my story.
I was like, you know, I really like that was I appreciated that, and that was definitely a hallmark too of you know, of the show, was that even people who were like sort of, you know, not significant to the plot, you know, or to the series overall, like, you did feel like, oh, I know that person too. Learned something about them. They showed me something.
There is this incredible moment in the episode where Gina breaks down the barrier of, you know, you're not in the front row, you know, and she goes up and she stands next to Donna, and they have this really powerful stuff. Do you remember putting any of that together or whatnot?
I could be wrong. Please, don't quote me, but we are being recorded. So I'm just putting that. I think that Tori was part of the conversations for some of that speech. I think I could be wrong, but I think that, you know, it is such a personal thing. Obviously, and again, another amazing performance. I thought she did such a beautiful job, and I think she might have, like, there were either conversations or she had some notes on it or something. And I think she did work with John and Lori on it a bit, because, and, you know, yes, I mean, like, again, like, we're talking about how many years and seasons and episodes of like, that was her TV dad for this show for so long. Like, it makes total sense. And I think it came together again beautifully, and it felt really, really, I mean, I did tear up and start crying. I thought it was really beautifully done. Yeah. So, but I think that was always obviously going to be a very important moment. And I think for, obviously, you know, there is that moment where Gina also talks about getting closure. And when I was talking about, like, she's getting to say goodbye, like, I think it's nice that she got, whether or not she's just saying in the moment, at least she did get a little victory by the end of the episode before she left. So I think that was an important thing for her to happen for that character.
Interesting about 90210. I'll share a little bit of a personal story that just the power of what you guys were doing at that time, that my wife actually does have a half sister like this that she found out about later in life. And when her father died, my wife was making a speech. The sister did not go up, but everybody was grief ridden. And then afterwards, they're both huge 90210 fans. And I referenced this particular storyline of what had happened about walking up, and it gave them a moment of like levity in a very difficult situation. So it's powerful of what you're doing on 90210 and how it affects all these fans in different ways. Has anyone told you that, or have you had that experience where you realize like, wow, this show is doing something that's beyond the scope of the characters and the arcs?
I think more, honestly, watching this episode, I thought to myself, this is such a good, not even like pamphlet handbook or something, but I thought how the death and the grief was handled was so interesting. I'm like, I wonder if a lot of people thought about this episode as they were going through loss in their own lives, because it just almost not laid out like the step, but it kind of did show some steps that you would have to go through. And it, as much as I don't feel like I've seen many times on television, the paramedics coming and the doctor having to be called, and like like I felt like it showed like what really happened. Someone has to be declared dead, and I was like, oh, that might have been for somebody helpful, like even like knowing what to expect. Do you know what I mean? Or whether it's like taking this step, like I really appreciated thinking like we weren't trying to gloss over
even Felice is even like, I don't know where his checkbook is. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, and Gretchen, I don't know, I mean, I'm not going to go on record this, but I do feel like over one of those two seasons, Lori might have lost a parent.
Yeah, I think so.
And so I'm pretty sure, and so I think that she brought some of that to it.
But just share, and also sharing it, then using that to like, I think that'll obviously live on for generations. I still hear now people are watching it on, is it on Pluto now too?
Pluto, Hulu, all of it.
Like, and people, it's got an evergreen quality to it that I think not only because of the friendship circle and the tightness of friendship, I just think there are these snapshots of like these moments in people's lives that are kind of lodged in, right? Even like you're saying, Peter, for you, how it became like a reference point for you to sort of like
they were able to get through it. It's very difficult conversations, but that part of it, referencing 90210, and I mean, it was literally exactly what had happened, only except that nobody went up and helped the other one out, right? But it's interesting how it reflects real life and real situations. I think it's very powerful. I think it's one of the most powerful shows for that our generation grew up with it. And I know, Aaron, you said that you were a fan of the show prior to writing for the show, so we grew up with different situations. We're all talking about the 90s now. It's a big thing. I don't know. But for what reason? It's because of the television that we grew up with, and you guys are a big part of that. Yeah.
I mean, it is such a time capsule. It is such a perfect time capsule of what it was like back then, especially like the clothes and those men's suits in this episode. But even just like the thing that was also really cool is as a gay person, we were able to tell a lot of stories about that. And Kelly was teeing up.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. And so, and I think we already covered an episode where where Dylan was like a part of a hate crime.
Yes.
We talked about that one at one point. But, I had forgotten just how we tackled a lot of those stories. And for a lot of gay people who really, even in 1998, 99, the representation, you had Will and Grace was, I think, just beginning, but I mean, there wasn't a ton of representation still. And it just was so interesting, like when Pia, who, God, I remember her, she was fabulous too.
I loved her,
Yeah, she was great. But when she was talking about like, it's a ballot initiative about gay clubs in schools. And I'm like, well, that's not an issue anymore. But boy, was it back then. because we
I mean, some of what we've seen now has been covered a lot, but some of it is still relevant. Like we're still dealing with some of this stuff, you know.
Yeah, but we were ripping from the headlines a lot.
For
Like,
sure.
I remember, like, we would bring in, you know, things that we'd read about and news stuff, and that was often the foundation.
Speaking of, you know, of the foundation stuff, like the soundtrack and the music, Beth Hart, I love that song, and I will always, it's weird, I will always attach that song, Leaving LA or whatever, I don't know the name of it, someone knows it better than I do.
It's called the LA song.
The LA song. I will always attach that to Vanessa Marcil and Gina leaving 90210. But I, you know, like if I had to leave something, it's a song I go to. I mean, how great was Beth Hart in that?
That was amazing. I mean, that song too. I was so excited. I forgot it was in this episode, and when I saw her name come up, I got so excited because to this day, I think it's in my top 10, my favorite songs. And I feel like that rendition that she sang is no longer, it's hard to find. Like,
it's not available. Right.
It's Apple Music World have whatever.
Whatever.
And I literally was like, I am finding that CD today and I'm pulling it out because I like that version better than one that's readily available.
Because now there's like a drum track on it and it's not helpful.
Yes. But that song I think is timeless and it is of that time. And it is, and I it's one of my favorite songs of all time. So like I was really excited, and it was really like she was so cool. Like it was really, and that was the very beginning that she launched, right? Like pretty much.
I mean, that was like that was what was so fun about that show, is that Ken Miller, who handled all of the post and all of the music and all of that stuff for all of the spelling shows at that time, he always, like, people wanted their artists on that show. I mean,
Brian has told me that like whenever there was a guest that would come on, he would be like, "Oh my God, thank you for doing our show," and the guest would be like, "No, thank you for letting me do your show."
That's cool.
Yeah, and like the label. I mean, I remember, you know, the label would send, like, I just think about like the perks that we got back then. You know, being writers on that show, things like the label would send tickets to like Beth's show, and I think, didn't we see her at the Hard Rock or something?
That's amazing.
House of Blues, maybe something like that.
Yeah, House of Blues. But like they'd send tickets, and or, you know, the writing staff's on the list, and it was just like, I mean, like I look back on the artists that were even on the last 2 seasons, and they were all great. I mean, I still remember when they were like, we're gonna have on this artist named Christina Aguilera, a song called Genie in a Bottle, and the whole writing stuff was like, who's she?
Right.
Wow, you know. So anyway,
and then Brian told me that Vincent Young struggled to say her name, and they had to do many takes.
Oh, is that right?
He can say it now.
That's great.
Yeah, I love that about Vincent Young.
Bring up Brian. I loved Brian in this episode too.
Yes, he
did a great job.
Yeah,
I mean, they all were great. I mean,
it's interesting because when I asked you about whether or not you knew the that was the end game and all that stuff, it's because it feels like you, so maybe it was a happy accident, maybe you did know, but it feels like you were tying them closer together in a way that they'll never be closer. I mean, her father dies, he's there for her every step of the way as a friend. I don't know if he's dating her as a friend at this point, but they're very close, obviously. So it's family bonds, right? It's a relationship that's very important. And I thought that you guys were bringing them way weirdly on a totally different level now than what we've seen with Donna and David before.
You know, watching it, I thought that too. I was like, are we ramping toward that? I mean, you know, but again, knowing where we ended up, yes.
Right.
But I mean, it also, just because you know, and I also really appreciate it about the show, and it does it successfully. It is it's self-reflexive, or looking back on our friendship circle and how long we've been a friendship circle, and says it out loud to the camera and to the audience, which is true. And it always rings true. It doesn't ring like we're just like saying it because we're saying it because we can. And in that moment, he is the appropriate person to be there with her. Do you know what I mean? Like friend, ex, everything, all of it. And that is the person I feel like she is going to lean on to get her through this. And I love that story. And did you hear the loop line? It sounded like we put in later the ADR line to make it very clear. Thank you for coming back this morning. When the scene comes in, when Gina comes in, he's coming down the stairs, and it's Brian's coming down the stairs, and Tori's with him. It was after he came over and they were sitting on the couch. you hear this line that's off camera, which is "Thanks for coming back this morning." So it's like,
Oh, I did catch that.
someone
Yeah.
was trying to make it very clear that they didn't spend the night on the couch, but okay, whatever.
I did catch that. I did catch that too. Yeah,
Isn't
I
that
got
funny?
that.
I was just
Yeah.
like, okay, we got it. I didn't think any hanky panky happened anyway, but all
Yeah.
right.
Not in her emotional state, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
got it.
Did you catch that, Aaron?
I didn't.
I was like, oh, how funny.
I
Okay.
did not. Oh, that is great.
Yeah.
All right, looking back on this episode, we're at the end here. Do you think it still holds up, both of you?
Yes,
Yeah.
it does. It really does. I mean, not only is it it is I again, like I said, I was so, like, what a journey through grief that I feel like I have not seen on another television episode.
For sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, at all. And I was really like proud of what was done by that show as like the little part we played in it, and it absolutely holds up. And also like, and the cherry on top for me was the best part of it all.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. She's incredible. Yeah.
I think the other reason why the show holds up and why people want to return to it is, you know, when that show was done, what was that, 99?
Probably. Yeah.
Okay, so, you know, I haven't seen it since it aired. But 3 years ago, I lost my dad. And so I'm watching it with a totally different lens, watching it through a different lens now. And I think that's the other interesting thing about this particular generation, this being such an important show, because, you know, you don't know what that feels like until you lose somebody, until you watch your own mother go through some of that stuff. Like, I don't know where this is, and I don't know where that is. And so I really appreciated it, you know, this go around in a way that I didn't back then when I didn't have that life experience. And so
I think that's true for fans too. I think
I think so. I think that's why the show is enduring.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, this has been great, guys. I know I love chatting with you. Let's do some more down the line.
Please.
If I don't talk to you, you know, have good holidays, all that stuff, you know.
Too.
Yeah,
have a wonderful. I hope you get a break of some sort. Anything?
I will at some
Okay.
point. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I got one coming. Yeah.
Yeah, no, let's for sure at some point look at that kidnap episode.
Oh, 100%.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. It was so much fun.